Because not everyone has the metalwork skills to be able to build a Freddy glove, I've made a design that anyone with a 3D printer can build. I wanted it to be accurate to the original glove used in the first two films, so I've gone through every frame of the first two movies and every photo of the hero glove I could find, researching and taking measurements, which I then modelled in CAD to make 3D files that I'm giving away as a free download. The link is in the video description, along with a list of equipment and materials used. First, download and print out all the parts. The pieces for the finger stalls, fingertips and back plate I print upside down, because I've put a letter to symbolise which pieces are the index, middle, ring and pinky finger. That way you can keep track of all the parts once they're printed. With all the other parts, just print them upright. If you're having trouble printing the pieces and they're curling up on the printer bed, don't print too many at a time. I found that because the pieces are so thin and flat, printing a few at a time caused less failures. I printed my finger pieces and back plate in a bronze coloured filament, so that if any paint scratches or rubs off, I still have a bronze colour underneath. Give the pieces a sand on the top surface and both sides of the blades. Before we start assembly, there's a tool that we need to make from a piece of 24mm wooden dowel. When I went to buy the dowel from my hardware store, I found that it was cheaper to buy a budget garden rake, so I bought a rake and cut 200mm off the end. If your dowel has a flat end, sand it rounded to make the shape that we're going to form the finger pieces over. To assemble each fingertip, warm the piece up using a hairdryer or heat gun. Don't overheat the pieces, we only need to get them warm enough so that they become malleable, not so hot that they shrink or melt. You can always 3D print an extra finger piece so you have a practice piece. Once the piece is soft and malleable, put it over the dowel clamped in a vise. Then form the fingertip over the rounded end of the dowel, folding the split on the end so that it joins. At the same time, folding the end with the holes over the dowel too. Give it a minute to cool down and it will harden again. Make sure the end with the holes hangs down vertically, don't wrap them right around the dowel. You want to end up with this U shape. If you make a mistake, just warm the piece up again and readjust it. To form each finger stall, warm the piece up, then lay it on the dowel over the fingertip and curl it over to align with the holes in the fingertip. Then form the remaining length over the dowel. Avoid putting any shape into the piece that will attach onto the back plate. This needs to remain flat. Again, if you make any mistakes, just warm the piece up again and correct them. Heat up the back ends of the finger stalls, then use a piece of wood to flatten them down, creating a bit of a crease. To prepare the back plate, warm it up, making sure that you have the side marked with a B as the back. Then, wearing a glove, lay the back plate over the back of your hand and give it a bit of shape, allowing it to cool and set rigid again. To make the rings under the fingers, warm up the shorter lengths and then form them around this end of the ring tool. You can use the groove engraved on the tool to help you get the symmetry. Next, warm up the longer pieces and wrap them around the rounded end of the ring tool. While I form this ring and let it cool down, we'll talk about the paint. Because they only had one hero glove that they used for the first two films, it changed a lot throughout the filming due to wear and repairs that were being done. So there's no one official look for this glove. So find a photo you like from the first or second film and then just replicate that look. I use a gold paint and spray from a distance to give a very light dust of gold, just to give a little bit of shine, not to actually paint the pieces gold. Then I use a copper coloured paint and I give a light dust just to give a hint of copper colour. Through this process we're trying to bring out a metal look by using these light dusty coats of different metallic paints. I spray a bit of brown paint into the lid of the can. Then using a small brush, I dab onto my work surface before stippling the tiniest amount of brown over the surface to give the look of tarnish and dirt. With the blades, I give them a good sand on both sides to make them as smooth as possible. Then I take a little piece of painter's tape and I cover up the surface that I'm later going to glue onto the finger. Using a silver chrome paint, I give the blades a good coat. Let all this dry thoroughly, and this is all the painting we need to do right at the moment. Select the blade that has the longest tang and take the index finger tip. If you only gave the pieces a light dust of paint, we're ready to join the blades on. However, if you gave them quite a heavy coat of paint, you might want to sand or file some of the paint away to allow for better adhesion between the blade and the fingertip. Put some superglue on the underside of the tang and lay the blade on the fingertip, making sure that it's directly down the middle of the piece. Hold it in place for a minute or two until the glue grabs. Then repeat this with the other 3 blades and leave them for a good half an hour to set. Now I'll show you something really cool. Flow some superglue into the gap where the blade meets the fingertip, and then sprinkle on some baking soda or bicarbonate of soda, and using a little paintbrush, brush off the excess. A really cool thing happens the instant that baking soda meets superglue. It cures into a solid plastic instantly. This is fantastic for us because this will replicate the solder used in the film to join the blade to the fingertip, but it will also help strengthen and fill any gaps. If you miss any areas or need to fill up anything more, just go back, flow a little more superglue, and repeat the procedure. Do the same on the other side of the blade, and then repeat this with the other 3 fingers. To assemble the fingertips with the finger stalls, I use 2 sizes of these antique bronze double cap rivets. Both are 6mm long, but with a 6mm diameter and an 8mm diameter head. All the fingertips are jointed to the finger stalls with the 6mm rivets, except for the index finger, which has 8mm rivets, swapped during a repair somewhere between Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 and Part 2. To put the rivets in, just poke them through the holes from the outside and then put a cap on, and gently crimp it with a pair of pliers. Don't crush them too hard or they'll clamp up the joint. If done right, this gives the fingers a good flexible joint. Take a small tack and file or grind off the point, making it almost blunt. Take an 8mm rivet cap and gently tap the tack with a hammer to leave a visible dent just off centre in the outside surface of the rivet cap. Insert the middle finger rivet from underneath. Place a block of wood under the cap and tap the rivet closed from the inside. The This will hopefully leave a noticeable dent and also a bit of a ridge in the middle of that rivet cap. Use 6mm rivets on the index and ring fingers, with the rivets inserted from the outside and the rivets tapped closed from the outside. But for the pinky finger, use an 8mm rivet cap with the rivet inserted from the outside and the rivet tapped closed from the inside. Mark the positions for the rings to sit under the fingers. Just here by this curve, and just here by this curve on the fingertip. The shorter square finger rings go in the tips, and the longer round ones go in the stalls. Put a drop of superglue on each end of the finger rings and then position them in place. They're designed to have about 6mm at each end of the ring glued into the finger. Then I use clothespins to hold the ends in place. This is probably the hardest part of the whole build and can be quite fiddly, so take your time and leave them all to sit for as long as you can for the glue to cure to its full strength. Don't be tempted to mess around with them, as it could dislodge the rings or weaken the joints, and we are relying on the strength of these joints to take quite a bit of pressure when the glove is finished. Here in New Zealand I didn't have access to a 1980s Wells Lamont glove, so I just went for a similarly coloured glove. My glove doesn't have the signature adjusting strap, so I'm going to make that, using some leather from the left-hand glove which I don't need, and using this template which is part of the 3D printed set. I take the 3D printed buckle and I paint it silver. And now I have the missing tab. Again, using dozens of reference photos from the first two films, I've mapped out where all of the holes are in the leather. Cut out these black sections, and don't forget about the little holes here on the index finger, the side of the palm, and a very small hole in the thumb. You can pause this video and use it as a reference, and then mark out the positions of these holes on your own glove using a pencil. Then using a sharp pair of scissors, cut out these holes. If you want to dull down the holes that you've cut, use a piece of sandpaper. Where your cuts might have exposed some of the stitch seams, just put a little drop of super glue to stop them fraying. Some leather gloves have a seam that runs through the wrist, so to stop this from coming apart, super glue in a patch of leather on the inside for support. I cut out the label, removing as much as I can from the outside. And then remove the remainder from the inside. Using a stitch remover, I unpick all the stitching that holds in the elastic. Then I cut the elastic out. I get an 8mm wide beige shoelace, I cut it in half, then I take one of these wooden crafting beads and then super glue the aglet into the bead and cut off the end. We've finished making all the components for the pull string, now we just have to sew them in. Using the stitch remover, I remove a small part of the seam so that I can insert my tab. And then I sew it back up again. Using a pencil, mark the positions for the holes in the buckle. Then using something sharp, cut slits in these positions. This is a fiddly thing to do, but I thread the lace through the slits and through the buckle. Then using a stitch remover, I make a small hole and then adjust the whole thing to get the correct length of lace. And stitch the shoelace into the glove. This gives a pretty good approximation of the original vintage glove used in the film. Wipe down the glove with isopropyl alcohol. This removes the shine, dries out the leather a bit, and helps the leather dye absorb. Allow the alcohol to dry off before progressing. Lightly dab on brown liquid shoe polish in very light washes to build up the aged colour. Use the cheapest brown liquid shoe polish that you can find, because the cheap ones usually have less pigment in them, which actually works better for this job. We're not trying to turn it brown, we're just trying to build up layers of colour. Think about how a glove would age, with inconsistent colours predominant on the palm. Using a brush, scuff on black shoe polish to add darker areas where the dirt and grease would accumulate on the glove, focusing on the seams and joints. Again, don't try and make it too dark in one go. It's better to build up layers of colour until you get it as dark as you want, because you can always add more, but you can never take it away. When you're happy with the look of the glove, then it's time to add the armature. Insert the fingers of the glove into the finger rings on the armature. Then put the glove on and position it so that it sits comfortably on your hand. Use a pen to make marks where the 3 mounting points will be on the glove. Find the marks on the glove and pierce a very small hole in them. To hold the back plate onto the glove, insert 6mm rivets into each of the holes from below. Then using a hammer, tap the caps into place. Once you're happy, you can go back and start putting the finishing touches on the paintwork. Copper turns red with heat from soldering, so you can stipple on a little bit of red paint around where the blades are soldered on. Adding more brown for extra dirt and tarnish, along with some silver over the glue joins for the solder. Keep building up the colours slowly until you achieve the look that you want. Don't forget the finger rings too, which were made out of brass, so head more towards a gold colour. Once you're happy, put it all aside to dry. And there you have it, a screen-accurate Part 1 and 2 Freddy Glove. Check out the video description for a link to the 3D files and a list of the materials used. If you have any questions or ideas for future videos you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.